50 years of teaching, research, and public service to California and the nation. Cal State Fullerton is taking an active role to strengthen the nation's ability to compete globally through science, technology, engineering, and math by increasing efforts in research, education, and workforce development. At Cal State Fullerton, we are preparing the students of today to be the leaders of tomorrow. More information at fullerton.edu.
I grew up watching KCET. Actually, I grew up because I was watching KCET.
Coverage of Town Hall Los Angeles speakers on Life and Times is made possible by a grant from the Boeing Company.
Tonight on Life and Times. It's a city with a sparkling reputation, but what happens when you dig a little deeper?
Suspects running in packs, sometimes robbing single males on the street, sometimes just attacking them. Some of the motives have been race, and as I have said earlier, we are prosecuting those cases as hate crimes.
And then, how has a small museum become an international player? These treasures from the ancient world offer a hint. It's all straight ahead on tonight's Life and Times.
Life and Times is made possible through the generous support of the L.K. Whittier Foundation, dedicated to improving the quality of life by supporting innovative endeavors in the fields of medicine, health, science, and education. And by a generous grant from Jim and Ann Rothenberg.
Pasadena seems to have it all. Great museums, colleges, architecture, and of course a vibrant downtown. But it also has something that many of us can't see: growing tensions between two minority groups, blacks and browns. And that tension has surfaced in a series of attacks on Latino men. So what's behind these attacks, and how is the city responding? Sam Louie went to Pasadena to find out.
It's the site of the annual Tournament of Roses parade, full of pageantry, elegance, and stars. A showcase for the quintessential Southern California city, Pasadena. But there's another less rosy view of this affluent city of 145,000 and its popular revitalized downtown. Over the past couple of years, tensions have been growing between black and brown, and it's documented in a series of crimes targeting Latino men, many of them immigrants.
2005, 2006, we noticed a trend of suspects attacking single males in the evening hours.
Deputy Chief Christopher Vicino says there have been 75 cases of young African Americans targeting Latino men.
These suspects were young adults running in packs, sometimes 3 or 4, sometimes as many as a dozen. Sometimes robbing single males on the street, sometimes just attacking them.
While no one has been killed in these attacks, police say they have led to some serious injuries and hospitalizations. Some of these attacks are being prosecuted as hate crimes.
These attacks have been termed "sock on Mexicans." The Pasadena Police Department does not use that term. We have found that that term is demeaning to the victims in these cases, and we prefer not to use it. We've termed these youth street attacks.
I think they're easy prey. A lot of times they're just trying to make a living, and then they get out of work. A lot of times they get paid in cash, and a lot of times the gang members, they know that, so they take advantage of them. They beat them and rob them.
The root cause of the attacks is a shift in Pasadena demographics.
Over the last 20 years, statistics from the U.S. Census Bureau show that the influx of Hispanics here in Pasadena has nearly doubled to 33%. Meanwhile, the African American population has dwindled to 15%. And some believe this disparity is causing a racial rift in the city.
Some people do feel that because of the shift in demographics, the growth of the Latino community, that it is perceived as a threat, and there's a backlash, like an anti-immigrant backlash.
Randy Ertl is the executive director of El Centro de Acción Social, or Center for Social Action. It's a nonprofit agency dedicated to promoting cultural understanding in Pasadena.
When anything happens, when there are crimes or injustices, yeah, we do have to denounce them. We have to speak up. Because if we don't speak up against them, then we're complacent and in a way accomplices to hatred, you know, so we can't stay mute.
Ertl believes there's been many more victims, but the attacks go largely unreported.
I think that the victims, they stay quiet because they feel raped, like physically and emotionally.
So what's being done about these troubling revelations? First, El Centro is speaking out, refusing to stay quiet. Second, it's looking for ways to ease black-brown relations. It has partnered with the city and the NAACP to think of ways to reach Latino and African American youth.
We decided to come together to denounce that kind of hate crimes from either community. That's the point that we really wanted to get across to our young kids or young adults, is to that no hate crimes are tolerated.
It's a message they'll have to convey in the midst of change. With more Latino families moving in, African Americans are feeling the competition tightening for entry-level jobs.
It's causing a lot of friction. It's causing a lot of friction because African Americans, because their ancestors, their families grew up here, they don't feel there is a place for them any longer here in this city.
Joe Brown is the president of the Pasadena branch of the NAACP. He's also a longtime 30-year resident of Pasadena.
The war that we see here in this community is war on economics. Many of our African Americans and Latinos are involved in the lower rung of the employment opportunities here in this city. Unfortunately, most of the African Americans are having to move out to places like Rialto, San Bernardino County.
To combat this war on economics, Brown urges the young to stay in school and get a good education.
Gangs are not the answer, whether it's in this city or any other city. The answer to the plight that is in many of the communities all over the country is educating yourselves, but getting to move into some entrepreneurship that does not involve selling crack and cocaine on the street corners.
Brown also challenges business leaders to take a more active role in programs for minority youth.
We need to have many of our entrepreneurs who are already in this city to begin to step up and give some of these young people an opportunity to train them, to mentor them on what it will take to be successful in that arena.
Education and vocational training are long-term goals. Joe Brown says there's a more immediate need for the two groups to get to know each other better. And that's what's happening here at the Villa Park Community Center in Northwest Pasadena. It's a gym where African Americans and Latinos of all ages have a place to work out, lift weights, and train for boxing.
We all care for one another. We all cheer each other on. We all embrace each other. We make it a family-oriented program so that everybody feels safe and wants to come here and enjoy themselves.
Fausto Della Torre is the boxing instructor. He grew up in Northwest Pasadena and is deeply concerned about the rash of racial attacks in his old neighborhood.
It saddens me to hear that because if you look around, we have a lot of immigrants here that come.
Fausto credits the family spirit here for building bridges between black and brown.
We open the doors to let people know, to say, look, we can come together, we can put these gloves on, we can have a sparring session and still embrace, still love each other.
These are just facts of life. One ethnic group that's coming in is more dominant than the other. We need to learn how to communicate with each other.
As for the attacks on Latino immigrants, police have cracked down. They've made 23 arrests. And so far this year, the number of attacks on Latino men by blacks has been cut in half. But law enforcement is just one part of the solution. Community leaders know that solving the deeper problem will take even more time and effort.
There are social issues, like in certain areas of Pasadena, especially Northwest, that need to be addressed, you know, like in terms of poverty, crime, gangs. That's sort of like the invisible part that it's there, it's a reality, and we can't deny it.
I'm Sam Louie for Life and Times.
So what do you think of racial tensions in Pasadena? You can post your comments on our blog. Just go to kcet.org/lifeandtimes/blog.
KCET.org is the place to look for the very latest on Life and Times. Just go to KCET.org, scroll down the page, and click on Life and Times.
Corporations are not people. That's the myth that economist and writer Robert Reich would like all Americans to understand. And if corporations are not human beings, then we certainly can't expect them to be kind, generous, and ethical. Andy says corporations certainly do not have a conscience. And that's a key point in his new book, Supercapitalism. Reich is a well-known NPR commentator, former Secretary of Labor, and now a professor at Berkeley. He spoke recently at Town Hall Los Angeles, where I talked with him about this new era that he calls supercapitalism. It seems obvious that we live in a supercapitalistic world, but you mean something rather specific, right? You mean a certain brand of capitalism.
Val, a sort of capitalism that we've never seen before, that is turbocharged and global, where competition between firms is intense, and where we as consumers and investors really never have had as much choice and as much value. We're very powerful as consumers and investors. Problem is, as citizens, we are less powerful than we used to be.
Do the two exclude each other?
Well, they didn't used to. I mean, during the golden age, the not quite golden age, between 1945 and 1975, when almost everybody's incomes went up together as the economy grew, we talked about democratic capitalism with a small d. We assumed that capitalism and democracy went hand in glove, and that you couldn't have one without the other. And we sold the world, basically, on the notion that our brand of democratic capitalism was the alternative to Soviet communism. And follow us, we said. Well, we assumed that if we spread capitalism around the world, democracy would follow. But if you look at China today, you see that it's possible to have capitalism, a hotbed of capitalism, without democracy at all. And even here in the United States, arguably, we have less democracy than we used to have.
But right now, there is in our society a kind of attitude that corporations are evil, they're the bad guys, you know, that they're the ones that, you know, are causing pollution, child labor, and so forth. And so, you know, we just have to slap them on the wrist and make them behave. Is that the answer?
No. In fact, I wrote this book in part to disabuse ourselves of that kind of simplistic thinking. Corporations are doing what they're doing because we, as consumers and investors, are demanding better and better deals. And because of globalization and technology, the internet, for example, we have the power as consumers and investors to get better and better deals. Companies have to give us good deals or they will not survive. So they are outsourcing and pushing wages down and using child labor abroad, or they are polluting the atmosphere. They will do whatever they can to get us and keep us unless there are laws preventing them that say, no, that's not going to be allowed.
But don't you think that, you know, corporations like Walmart should, just out of a sort of, you know, moral responsibility, provide health care, you know, not, you know, use child labor? Can't we expect that of corporations, to have a conscience?
That's the problem, Val. Corporations are not people. And we assume when we talk about corporate social responsibility that corporations are moral creatures. They aren't. In fact, corporations don't have minds. Corporations are just pieces of paper. They're contracts. Everybody working for the corporation, including chief executives and everybody else, they are trying to get and keep consumers and investors in a highly competitive atmosphere. We can't blame corporations because we can't blame pieces of paper, just as we can't criminalize them, and we should not even try. We should not give them political rights in the democratic process because, again, they're pieces of paper. The idea that companies are people has caused so much misunderstanding. In fact, one of the reasons I wrote the book is to make sure we understand that if we just push companies to be socially responsible or try to, we're going to get nowhere. What we have to do is work on making the political process responsive to us, get democracy to work for us, get money out of democracy, put a wall up between supercapitalism and democracy.
Some people are going to be very surprised to hear you, in a sense, let corporations off the hook and not hold them to a high moral standard. But you believe they should behave better, but your prescription for getting them to behave better is what?
Well, I draw a distinction between the game the capitalist game in which every corporation is trying to, and every executive and everybody in the corporation is trying to attract and keep customers and investors on the one hand, and the rules of the game on the other hand. Now, if we are talking about changing the rules, that is a higher minimum wage, or companies have to provide health care, or companies cannot use child labor abroad, well, that's the political process. That's how we address those requirements. In every one of us, there is a consumer and investor trying to get the best deal. There's also a citizen inside us, and there is some tension between the consumer and citizen, consumer in us and the citizen in us. We want the best deal as consumers. The citizen in us says, well, wait a minute, we don't like the social consequences of some of those great deals. The place we address that conflict is called democracy.
So you're saying if we are going to improve the world, whether it be environmentally, economically, inequality is getting worse and worse, that the place to do that is not to hammer on the CEO's door, but to go to Washington. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I'm saying that hammering on the CEO's door is not going to have any effect at all. Even if somehow Walmart was shamed into providing higher wages and better health care for employees, for example, resulting in prices being higher.
Yeah.
Well, consumers then would go to a Walmart competitor that did not provide high wages.
Because there's always going to be someone who is willing to do whatever it takes to offer the lower prices.
Exactly. In a super competitive, super capitalist world,
Which is
there is always going to be some rival in the market that's willing to undercut somebody else.
But how about, how about these good corporations? You know, the ones that have the wonderful, the Ben and Jerry's, and the ones that have the great reputations for doing well and doing good. They've proven that they can do both, right?
Mostly public relations. For example, take Ben and Jerry's. I think Ben and Jerry's is a nice company. They don't advertise the fact that they are providing the rich